While Biden rejoices over a soft landing, Powell of the Federal Reserve is concerned. President Joe Biden is touring the country, touting the economy's resilience and its remarkably thriving job market. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is sending a very different message. If the economy continues to accelerate, the central bank will likely slam the brakes harder in order to kill inflation. The economy's reaction to the Fed's highest interest rates in 15 years will shape both men's legacies. The path ahead will become clearer on Tuesday, when the Labor Department releases the January Consumer Price Index, which is expected to show that inflation fell for the 7th consecutive month. It ran at an annualized rate of less than 3% in the second half of 2022, which is a promising trend. With job growth surging and wage gains leveling off, there is more optimism than in nearly a year that the economy will slow along with inflation without a painful recession, a so-called soft landing. Last year, however, prices rose faster than they had in 4 decades, and Powell says he will do whatever it takes to keep borrowing costs high and prevent price increases from becoming a more permanent feature of the economy. We're in an economy right now that obviously has some bright spots and some darker spots, with inflation still in the process of coming down, said Tobin Marcus, a senior policy and politics strategist at Evercore IC and former economic advisor to Vice President Biden. The president, for obvious reasons, is more interested in highlighting the bright spots, whereas Powell must maintain some focus on the need to complete the job. So, if inflation is running close to the Fed's 2% target rate despite a tight labor market, why does the Fed feel the need to repeatedly warn that it is poised to raise interest rates further and risk a recession? Inflation is a complicated beast, and it has a long history. Here are 5 key questions for Biden and Powell to answer about consumer prices and the economy's future. You stated that the job market is thriving. Why do I keep reading about the possibility of a recession? According to the Labor Department, unemployment has reached its lowest level since 1969, at 3.4%. Only during the Korean War has it been lower in modern U.S. history. It's an ideal point of pride for Biden, who has emphasized his job creation record in his annual State of the Union address and on the campaign trail since then. However, Powell is concerned that low unemployment will cause wages to skyrocket, increasing labor costs for employers and thus prices, a phenomenon known as the wage price spiral. The Fed is concerned with inflation, but the job market provides an important signal about where prices may be headed. Demand for goods and services is what generates jobs and gives people money to spend. That is, a strong labor market indicates that consumers and businesses will be able to withstand rising prices. Essentially, the Fed is willing to risk a recession in order to avoid what happened in the 1970s, when the Fed backed off on interest rate hikes and inflation returned with a vengeance. The logic is simple: we understand how to deal with recessions. It is more difficult to eradicate inflation. So it's better to err on the side of caution, because you can always change your mind and lower your borrowing costs. Is it really necessary for the Fed to harm the labor market in order to reduce inflation? That is the billion-dollar question. Many experts would say no, citing idiosyncratic factors such as supply shortages, government spending, and Russia's war in Ukraine that have driven this bout of inflation and cannot be remedied by higher interest rates. To a large extent, the fading of those temporary factors has contributed to the cooling of inflation. However, if inflation does not continue to fall, Fed officials will want to raise rates even higher, or perhaps just keep them at punishing levels for longer, until they see what they call a labor market softening, fewer job openings, slower wage growth, and, more than likely, slightly higher unemployment. Wait, did you say inflation has been hovering around 2% for the past 6 months? Isn't that the goal of the Federal Reserve? Are they almost finished? Yes, the Fed's goal is 2% inflation, but they're not there yet. Gas prices, which are volatile and driven by global circumstances, have contributed significantly to the reduction in price spikes. Powell and his colleagues want to ensure that inflation is slowing across the board. Prices for goods such as furniture and automobiles have fallen, while rents may be slowing. However, the Fed remains concerned about rising prices in core service industries, think restaurants, transportation, and healthcare, where labor costs are a major expense. Prices have risen by 4.7% in the last 6 months. That is where wages come into play. Are wages increasing at a faster rate? No, wage growth is not picking up. However, Fed officials and other economists believe that worker pay, which increased by about 5% in 2022, compared to a 6.5% increase in the CPI, is still rising too quickly for inflation to return to 2% in a sustainable manner. Wages were growing at a rate of about 3.5% per year prior to the pandemic, when inflation was just under 2%. Some argue that the Fed shouldn't be too concerned because incomes are simply recovering after being hammered by inflation, and workers will stop demanding such large raises once price spikes are more under control. However, the Fed is concerned that worker shortages will cause the unemployment rate to rise. At the very least, they would like to see fewer job openings. All of this does not appear to bode well for anyone seeking re-election in 2024. Yes, the Fed chairman has stated that unemployment could rise by a percentage point or more as the central bank continues to raise borrowing costs in order to slow spending. The gap between where the economy is and where it might be headed has been highlighted in recent days. Both Biden and Powell want to reduce inflation, but the Fed is likely to undermine one of the president's main selling points as we approach 2024. I believe both Biden and Powell would order the same items off the menu, said Jason Furman, former President Barack Obama's chief economist. However, they believe the menu is very different, with POTUS seeing the soft landing as an item on it while Powell is much less certain.